Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 485 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. On today's show, we are discussing how to savor those little glimmers of positivity and of joy that just seem to pop up into our days, but if we're not paying attention, we tend to miss them. This is a lighter, easier listening episode than Tuesdays. If you listen to Tuesday's episode, you know that was hot and heavy. This is easy listening today. But before we get into glimmers and what science says about savoring the moment, I do have a quick Stephanie story for you today. It's more of a story plus a realization. So I live in the suburbs. I'll just preface by saying that. I've lived in the city before, but these days, for the last 10 years, we've lived in the suburbs. And I was out and about with my youngest daughter the other day. There's a farm stand nearby, and it has, a lot of fields. And they have, one of their fields is for growing flowers, and they have a cut your own flowers option. So you pay $20 and you get to walk through the fields, take some pictures, take home a mason jar full of fresh cut wildflowers. And it's a lovely thing. I've done it before. We've paid the $20, all the things. It's a lovely little 30-minute activity, let's say. It was a gorgeous sunny day as we were driving by. My daughter and I, we weren't in any particular rush to get anywhere. So I thought, let's just walk through the fields. Let's just park. I don't need to bring home the flowers. I don't need to cut any flowers. Let's just walk through the fields, have a little bit of a lazy, 15 minutes and then go home. I don't need flowers at home. I already have cut flowers at home. And frankly, I didn't want to spend $20. So here was my plan. We were just going to walk through. We were just going to enjoy the flowers. We were not going to destroy the flowers, not take any home, not steal any flowers, nothing. Well, wouldn't you know, we were barred admittance to the field unless we first paid the $20. We needed a ticket to be admitted into the fields. And so, no, we could not enjoy the beauty of the flowers without first paying money. And so that's the story. Here's the realization. Here in the suburbs, at least where I live, and I know perhaps for some of you, especially in urban areas, it's different. But for me, in my suburb, whenever I leave the house, there are only two and only two places where I can go where I'm not expected to spend money. The first, of course, is the library. No financial transaction there. And the second is some hiking trail, some public land that is allowed for me to walk on. Literally everywhere else in the burbs, in my burb at least, is a place where I am blatantly expected to spend money. So stores, restaurants, or there's a fee for admission, like a museum, like a movie theater, like this field of flowers, right? Now, perhaps if I had some nice parks nearby, I could have a picnic in a park for free. That would be a free place to go. But where I live, in my suburb, the parks are really just playgrounds, and my daughters have aged out of playgrounds. So it would be super creepy for me to sit by myself at a playground and bust out a picnic. Now, I say all that to say, yeah, perhaps I could be invited over to somebody's house, but that entails that I'm getting an invite, which by and large is not happening. Pre-pandemic, I noticed that my age group of peers, they really don't invite people over for dinner by and large, like here and there, yes. But pre-pandemic and now certainly post-pandemic, the people I know would much rather meet at a different place. So like a bar or a restaurant, let's say. And the reason is, I'm guessing, is that it's too much work to have somebody over, to get the house in shape, to make the meal, etc. So when I go to a bar or restaurant to meet a friend and have a social activity, guess what? Money's being spent, and usually I'm paying for at least half the bill. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to lead up to today's topic, and I'm doing so in such a long manner. But I am working on absorbing the idea into my being. And it's an idea that I do believe is true, but I'm still working on making it a staple in my life. And that idea is that we should not have to spend money to find joy in our days. Living is not about grand vacations, even though certainly grand vacations are lovely. Life is not about amassing fancy stuff or doing special things and going to special places on the regular. Because even though everything, pretty much everything in my sphere is commodified these days, I do believe in my bones that it is the accumulation of countless, simple, free, small pleasures that make a good life. These small pleasures today, I'm calling them glimmers. It's not just about appreciating the small things that are obviously beautiful, right? It's also about choosing to find beauty, to seek out the glimmer in things that often pass us by, like the way the sunlight hits a pond and makes the water dance, let's say. If we're not paying attention, that glimmer can pass us by. And yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'll be the first to say, too often, historically, I've been too in my head to recognize the simple pleasures when they're in front of me. They pass me by without me having the opportunity to celebrate them. But these good moments are there regardless. Maybe your friend gives you a small gift. Maybe a colleague makes you laugh. Maybe a rainbow stretches across the sky as you're driving to work. These are really tiny moments. They're tiny glimmers. And the positive emotions associated with them do fade, but they don't have to if we know how to savor them. And that's where psychological research comes in, and I'm going to be citing an awful lot of it today. Now, before we get into what exactly savoring is, I'll just say that psychology says time and time again that step one is about recognizing that there's a glimmer in front of you. They're everywhere, all the time. For all of us, the glimmers are there. So it's about recognizing that they're there. That's step one. Some of us aren't even at step one. But if we're at step one, we're recognizing it. Now we need to take it up a notch. It's about bringing that glimmer, which is outside of you in your reality, in your world, in your external reality, and bringing it inside, internalizing it. It's about stopping, pausing, verbalizing in some cases, and fully enjoying. Because again, it is in the small things where beauty lies. And it doesn't take any money to realize that life can be magnificent. Glimmers are all around us all the time, and we just have to be receptive to seeing them. So on today's show, we're talking about savoring the glimmers. What is savoring? What is savoring not? We'll also talk about savoring's evil cousin, which is dampening. Oh gosh, I dampen all the time. We'll talk about that. And then I have 5 strategies for you to take into your own life so you can savor the glimmers. Now let's get into what on earth is savoring. Let's do it. Psychologists define savoring as, quote, the capacity to attend to, appreciate, and enhance the positive experiences in one's life, end quote. So that's the fancy schmancy definition. Now let's get into what savoring is in laywoman's terms. Savoring just means that we are attempting to fully feel, fully enjoy, and fully extend upon our positive experiences that happen to befall us in daily life. Savoring is a really great way to develop a long-lasting stream of positive thoughts and emotions, because positive events cannot always be relied on to make us happier, right? Like we can either sit around and just wait for good things to happen to us, or we can be active, or we can seek out moments of joy. And then once we find them, we can suck out every last drop of joy and pleasure that we can from the moment, right? So the former option, the sitting around and waiting for good things to happen to you, I mean, plenty of us do that, right? But perhaps we could be a little bit more active and a little bit less passive in seeking out the joy, right? The latter option, where we're seeking out the joy, that's likely more prudent of a strategy. Because if we're sitting around waiting for good things to happen, we may be sitting around waiting for a good long while. So savoring is not just noticing a glimmer and knowing that you're experiencing a glimmer. That is step one. But savoring goes further than that. Savoring is mindfully appreciating the glimmer. Savoring is about intentionally stretching and expanding and multiplying on the glimmer so that you are, again, extracting every last bit of joy you can from this simple pleasure, whatever it may be. So you're not rushing on to the next thing. You're sitting in it. You're not letting your mind dismiss the glimmer. We'll get to that in a minute. That's dampening, but you're not letting that happen. You're noticing how absolutely amazing the glimmer feels, like reading a book under a tree on a warm summer day. My daughters and I, we just did that yesterday. It was a nice day. We sat under a tree with a blanket. We had some snacks. We read our books. The breeze on my face, the wind rustling through the grass, like all of these little glimmers. I used it as an experiment. Like, how long could I sit with these glimmers? How long could I enjoy them before my mind, went on to something else? How long could I sit with these glimmers? That's savoring. And it could be anything. Like, my glimmers may be different from yours. Maybe your glimmer is the satisfaction you feel after hiking to the top of a mountain and relishing in the view. Maybe your glimmer is appreciating the wild beauty of nature on your walk down your driveway to your mailbox. These are glimmers, and they are worth savoring. I always find myself concerned with the fact that in our hyper-capitalist society, it's implied that the only things worth savoring are things that are really fancy, really shiny, really new, really expensive. But let's push back against that narrative by finding the simple beauty and relishing in life's simple pleasures. And again, your simple pleasures, maybe it's a cup of tea. I don't like tea. I think it tastes gross. But if tea is your glimmer, if your cup of tea is your glimmer, it's your simple pleasure, I encourage you here and now to suck the marrow from that glimmer. And we're going to talk about strategies to do so in a minute. But now, what are the benefits to savoring? Like, yeah, it feels good, but are there any other benefits to be had? Yes, is the answer. Spoiler alert, yes. Now, before we get into those, I just want to talk about a quick study that I found really interesting as I was researching for this episode. Studies find that humans are more willing to savor good moments when life feels chaotic and unpredictable. So in one experiment, I love this experiment, by the way, but people were walking by and were given flyers. Okay, so people were just walking by and somebody was handing out flyers. One flyer said, quote, "Life is unpredictable. Stop and smell the roses." So that was one flyer. Another flyer that was given out at random said, quote, "Life is constant. Stop and smell the roses." Now, not far from where the flyers were handed out was a table with a bouquet of red roses on top. Guess what the researchers found? They found that the people who read the first flyer, the flyer that said life is unpredictable, stop and smell the roses, they were 2.5 times more likely to stop and smell the roses than those who received the life is constant flyer. So that's one study. And another study, a related study, more than 6,000 people were surveyed, and they said they were more likely to savor and appreciate small moments of life when the world felt more chaotic. So if your life is feeling like it's a little bit out of your control, you're more likely to savor in those instances. However, I would love it if all of us, after listening to today's show, we recognize this about ourselves and we still seek out the glimmers even though when life is within our control, even when life is stable and good and calm. We should be seeking out glimmers when life is unpredictable and when it's predictable all the time. Because research into human psychology finds that when we're connecting with the glimmers, we're moving away from negative emotions. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's time for another Stephanie story. I'll make it quick. But just 2 weeks ago, we were in the middle of a major heat wave here in New England. And guess what? You knew what happened. My refrigerator broke. The temperature inside my refrigerator when I woke up one morning was a whopping 62 degrees. The breaking of our refrigerator is a big stress for us. It's a sub-zero fridge. So if we want to get another sub-zero, which aesthetically we do because our kitchen was built around the sub-zero, like the people who owned our house before redid the kitchen, and the space for the fridge is the space for a sub-zero sized fridge. So if we were to get another model, there'd be that ugly space around it. Okay, well, that's neither here nor there. A sub-zero fridge is like $13,000, which is really darn expensive in my humble opinion. And on top of that, we're in that phase of homeownership in which everything is breaking at the same time. It's a really great phase, isn't it? And I say that with complete and utter sarcasm. Our furnace is broken. Our air conditioning, if you listen to last Tuesday's episode, you already know it's super old, super inefficient, does not heat the top floor of our home. I mean, everything is breaking. Things need replacing, and the things that need replacing are really darn expensive. So the fridge was like the cherry on top 2 weeks ago. My stress levels were rising, and they were rising fast, and my husband's too. And I will say my husband is the coolest, calmest cucumber on the planet. And so when his feathers get ruffled, I know it's bad. So the stress level is rising in our home. My patience is waning. And then I found myself just pouring my morning cup of coffee. I sat with it. I turned off the news. I just sat with my cup of coffee with my hands wrapped around my cup, my warm cup. I found myself, appreciating the look of the sheen on the top where the milk mixes with the coffee. I took a sip. I took some deep breaths. I savored that entire cup of dark roast. And the fact of just sitting there mindfully with something that I loved helped me diffuse my stress so that I could move forward with greater clarity, with greater calm, with better ability to tackle the latest problem, which is the fridge that was 62 degrees. That's how savoring works. That's exactly how it works. And that's why it's so important. By connecting with the immediate joy and pleasure in my environment, which in that moment was my cup of coffee, I was able to move away from the anxiety and the stress and the rising levels of impatience that were, again, rising within me, quite literally. So social psychologist Fred Bryant, he is an expert in savoring, and he has found that within about 30 seconds, savoring can help improve our moods and also prime our brains for positivity. So don't forget, we're not only savoring that $100 bottle of wine or that expensive fancy dinner. We aren't only savoring that exotic beach vacation or that fancy new car we just bought. We certainly can and should savor these things, absolutely. But we're not only savoring these things. Because if you live like me, these things and events are rare. So it's about savoring the small glimmers that pop up during our days, like the feel of wind on our cheeks, or the joy of riding your bike to, work, or the smell of your coffee just before you take a sip. These are free glimmers. And in our go big or go home culture, many of us tend to forget that these glimmers matter, but they matter because, and this is psychology speaking, not Stephanie, savoring the moment is a great way to fight back against our brain's innate bias towards negativity. The negativity bias, we've covered it on this show before, and I will link to that episode in the show notes if you missed it or if you need a refresher. I am biased because I created that episode, but I think it was pretty darn good. We are primed, like our biology is primed to harp on the negative events and forget about the positive ones. Can I just say, as somebody who has a podcast and has a social media account that gets a good amount of attention these days. If I get 100 comments on something, let's say on Instagram, and 98 of them are nice and positive and encouraging, you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the 2 mean ones. How horrible is that? How horrible. The 2 horrible ones are enough to send me into a tailspin, even though 98 of you left encouraging and positive ones. It's the 2 negative ones that sit with me. And that is normal. That is human nature. But guess how we can fight against that negativity bias? It's by practicing savoring every single day. Because when we savor the glimmers, it's those positive and pleasant experiences that come forward to the forefront of our brains. Now, when subjects in a study took a few minutes each day to actively savor something they usually hurried through, like eating a meal or drinking that cup of tea or walking to the bus stop on a day when the sun was shining, they began experiencing more joy, more happiness, more other positive emotions, and fewer depressive symptoms. So what's happening here? What's happening? By exercising the circuits of connection in our brains that prioritize enjoyment, they were in a better position to create new experiences and memories of greater connection. So what does that mean? That means that the more you savor, the more you're priming your brain to savor more in the future. Now, the skill of savoring has been linked to increased life satisfaction, including in populations living with health issues. Psychologists have found that consciously savoring the moment is a great tool for enhancing resilience. How cool is that? It is also, of course, the antidote to anxiety and depression because our attention, again, is focusing on something positive, not the negative. We're not harping on and sitting in the negative. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, oh, but Stephanie, it all sounds great, but this world is broken. There's nothing good for me here. To that, I would say, yes, you're right. This world is broken. I mean, I'm not going to fight with you on that point. There's an awful lot wrong with the world. We all have problems, big and small. Some of us have bigger problems than others. Absolutely. And yet, despite all that, there are still countless opportunities each day for us all, regardless of our lot in life, to spot the glimmers. I don't know why we were put on this green and blue planet. I have no idea. I have no idea what the purpose of my existence is. I don't even know if there's a purpose, frankly, if I'm being completely honest. It all seems like a big fluke some days. But I'm here. And so I may as well choose consciously to extract as much little joy from the experiences I have every single day as possible. Savoring will not eliminate uncertainty and upset that I encounter in my life. But savoring the glimmers sure as heck makes it easier to deal with the negativity because savoring reminds me that good exists. We're going to take our sponsor break, but when we come back, we need to talk about dampening, which is the evil cousin of savoring. It's when we interrupt our savoring. We're also going to get into those 5 tricks for savoring more, savoring better, savoring harder, savoring longer. We're going to do that after a quick sponsor break. And we're back. On today's show, we are discussing savoring life's simple pleasures. And before we get into our strategies, our research-backed strategies to savor better, harder, longer, I want to talk about what savoring is not. Savoring is not hedonism. Savoring is not about overindulging in pleasure at your own expense. That's not what it is. Savoring is also not forcing yourself to enjoy moments that suck. I'm thinking about my parents listening here. Nearly every parent, particularly new parent, has been given the advice at one time or another to cherish every moment with your kids, right? They grow up so fast. And yes, the years do go by quickly in hindsight, but telling parents to appreciate every moment can invalidate the day-to-day challenges of parenting. And so when I was a new mom and I was really struggling, frankly, I did not know what I was doing and I was barely keeping my head above water. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I really struggled as a new mom. And so when I was told by well-meaning people in my life to cherish every moment, that made me even more stressed because then I started to think, oh, but I should be enjoying every moment and I'm not. And when I'm thinking that way, it made it even harder, more difficult to actually enjoy the moment because now I'm beating myself up for not enjoying this moment that I should be cherishing. And so for my parents listening, but also for my non-parents listening, if you are going through some other situation right now that sucks, I'm not asking you to pretend to love it. I'm not asking you to seek out glimmers and savor them. I am asking you to at least be receptive to glimmers, even if you're in a life season of overwhelm. Perhaps be open and receptive to accepting the glimmers as they come, but don't beat yourself up if you're not in a place right now to be able to cherish every moment, let's say. That is not what I'm asking you to do. Now, before we get into the how of savoring, I want to talk about dampening. Dampening, I've mentioned, is savoring's evil cousin. And dampening is what happens when we're savoring something, but the savoring gets interrupted by painful thoughts or painful feelings. So the best way I can describe dampening is with yet another Stephanie story. I do this a lot with my dog Lucy. She's 12 years old. She's in good health, but she's definitely slowing down. Her hips acting up. I know my days with her are numbered. And so just the other day, when I was petting her, I sat down on the floor. She loves butt rubs. I'm giving her butt rubs. I'm petting her. And my mind immediately dampens the quality moments I'm having with her. It's almost as though, it's not almost, it is. It's a defense mechanism in which my mind says, oh, she's going to die soon. Really, honestly, how sad is that to say out loud? Don't get too close. Don't love her too much, because if you do, Stephanie, you're inevitably going to get hurt. She's inevitably going to die, right? So it's almost like a stepping back of connecting with her so that I don't get extra hurt later. And, that's hard to say out loud, I must be honest. But it doesn't have to be with a dog who's, getting older. It can be with flowers. Let's go back to my field of flowers that I didn't get to walk through, right? You could be, walking through a field of wildflowers, let's say, and you could have the dampening thought, something like, oh, it's stupid to get excited over some dumb flowers. That's dampening, right? And so we all experience dampening thoughts. And when we experience them, it behooves us to be curious about where these dampening thoughts and feelings are coming from. What purpose are they serving? Often, and especially with my dog example, dampening is an attempt to protect ourselves from disappointment. It's about readying ourselves, steeling ourselves against savoring. And because many of us unconsciously believe that if we keep suffering at the forefront of our minds, we will better be prepared to handle hard things when they inevitably come, right? And yeah, savoring does not take away illness or death or suffering. Illness, suffering, death, those are parts of living on this green and blue planet. But savoring does offer us something, and something valuable, and that's perspective. We experience pain, yes, but we also experience joy and wonder and pleasure. Savoring allows us to keep hold of all experiences and to know that there's two sides to this living coin, right? Instead of just living in the pain and suffering and sadness side of the coin, savoring reminds us that there's another side to that coin. It's the joy and happiness side to the coin as well. So let's live on the other side of the coin sometimes, right? Let's flip it when we can. So I have some savoring strategies for you. And these savoring strategies that have been identified by researchers seek to build and reinforce our capacity to savor positive experiences. And so let's go back to that field of wildflowers that I did not get to walk through again. Okay. So let's say you're walking through a field of wildflowers. Step one is to walk through the field of flowers and say, ooh, this is pretty. That's a terrific start. But savoring the moment builds upon that. It goes much further than recognizing that the flowers are pretty. It involves pausing and opening all our senses to the experience. It's about smelling the flowers. It's about shutting down the brain chatter so that you're fully immersed in the flowers. It's about feeling the breeze, seeing the breeze rustle the flowers' petals. It's about hearing the birds as they're chirping away in the higher trees. It's about touching a flower petal and marveling at how something so delicate can survive in such a harsh environment, let's say. It's about stepping back from what's happening in front of you and being the observer, not the participant. So I'll give another Stephanie story again before we get into the strategies. So many stories today, but I'll never forget the time I savored successfully for the first time. It was just a random dinner at my house. I had my family over, my mother, my father, my sister and her kids and husband. It wasn't a special occasion. It was just a nondescript evening. I wasn't serving a fancy meal. The kids were, being kids in the other room. The adults were sitting around my dinner table. The wine was flowing. The food was being passed around. The conversation was occurring all around me. And I remember very vividly stepping out of the experience, stepping out of the moment and just thinking, wow, I am really enjoying myself. I am really enjoying being around these people. It was a deep appreciation in that moment for the people. I stopped worrying about whether the Brussels sprouts were cold, let's say, or whether there was enough rice. My mind stopped doing what my mind generally does, which is chatter and focus on the stuff that doesn't matter. I was truly zoned in on the fully experiencing the joy of the moment living. And it was like harmony almost. That's the best way I can describe it. And so as the dinner table chatter was going around externally around me, I successfully executed step 2 of savoring. Step 2 is when you ask yourself, why am I enjoying this? What is it that I'm enjoying about this? It's not just about recognizing, oh, this is nice, which so many of us don't do in the moment, right? So many of us, it's after everybody goes home and the dinner is cleaned up and the dishwasher's running that we say, oh, yeah, I did have a nice time tonight. Savoring is about being in the moment and recognizing that you're enjoying yourself. So that's good. Now, let's go on to step 2, which is savoring the moment, which is being the observer in the moment, not after the fact, not retroactively. So how can we capitalize on the moment? Savoring strategy number 1 is to add in a bit of effort. So add in a little bit of effort on the forefront to make the simple pleasure, to make the glimmer even better. So I love reading to my older daughter. We're currently reading the second Lord of the Rings book. We're struggling through it. I must be honest. It's dense, to say the least. But I love reading with her. And so how can I put in a little bit of extra effort to savor that nightly experience? I can get out the fuzzy blanket. I can light a candle. I can set the stage for an even better glimmer, right? I can dim the lights. Perhaps if you love cooking dinner, what can you do to make cooking dinner even better? So find something you like and make it even better. What can you do to make cooking dinner even better? I love blasting music when I cook dinner. I don't know why. I just do. I love blasting music and singing along as I cook dinner. That makes something even better. I've mentioned before recently, this is not something I enjoy, hanging up the laundry, but it's something I have to do every single day. I don't enjoy hanging up laundry in my musty, dim basement, but I do love hanging my laundry out in the sunshine. So putting in a little bit of effort, bringing up my clothes rack, putting it outside on my deck, hanging my clothes outside, feeling the sunlight on my face. Oh my gosh, getting in a couple minutes extra outdoor time. Yes, I will and can. Those are glimmers right there. So step 1. Strategy number 1 is to keep a lookout for opportunities in your day to make the glimmers even better. Maybe it's making a latte in the morning instead of your normal cup of coffee. Maybe it's eating your afternoon biscuits. I don't know. Do anybody eat biscuits? I don't know. Maybe it's eating your biscuits on your porch instead of in your kitchen. I don't know. Be creative here, but capitalize on your glimmers that are going to come to you, whether you know it or not. Capitalize on them by making them a little bit extra special. Strategy number 2 is to use your time wisely. If we are wasting time, we have less time for true moments of joy. Just an interesting fact here. The average time spent on social media worldwide is now at 147 minutes per day. Per day. That's like 2.5 hours, guys, spent on social media per person. By using your phone less, you will look down less, look up more, and be more present in your precious life. If we're mindlessly scrolling, we have less moments to enjoy our lives, to live, right? So make a list of what gives you pleasure. You don't have to think too hard on it. You don't even have to write it down. You can just take a couple moments and mental list it. But think about what brings you joy. Maybe it's your partner's laugh. Perhaps it's the way the sun streams in your kitchen window. Perhaps it's those moments and how it feels to drift off into sleep. Those moments right before you drift off into sleep. Once you know what your small moments are, extend them, right? So get rid of your phone and find ways to extend the moment. So my younger daughter, I love putting her to bed. She's just a love bug at bedtime. I love singing to her. I love snuggling with her. So what if that's a glimmer in my life, what if I quite literally extended that glimmer by putting her to bed 5 minutes earlier? That means I have 5 extra minutes with her at night. So use your time wisely by figuring out what gives you true joy. And then once you know what gives you true joy, extend upon it. Put yourself in those situations for more time. That's strategy number 2. Strategy number 3 is to slow down. Savoring the glimmers requires that we're paying attention, as we just established. If we're not paying attention, the glimmers are going to pass us by. It's not that they don't exist. It's that we're not paying attention, so we're not recognizing them. And so if we're running around crazy, doing all the things, crossing things off our to-do lists, the chances that we're going to catch the glimmers are nil, right? If we have filled our waking hours with busyness, we're going to miss the glimmers. Downtime is a necessary part of life, and science shows that it helps us to be healthier, to be more focused, more productive, more creative, you name it. Yet somehow we often lose sight of this, right? It's crazy to me that slow living is a thing. It's like slow living is only a thing because running around like chickens with our heads cut off is the norm, when it shouldn't be the norm. Slow living advocates already know this to be true, but there is so much joy to be had in removing ourselves from the rat race. Yeah, sure, 99% of the people you know are busy and important and successful by our culture's standards of success, but that's really only one way to live. It's the loudest lifestyle, sure. It's the lifestyle that gets the most attention, absolutely. But it's not the only way to live your life. And it's very likely not the best way to live your life either, if we're being honest. Now, related to this is to take more breaks. Stop. Pick your head up again, as we just talked. Look around. Breathe. Well-established research has shown that low-level daily stress can create such intense wear and tear on our body's physiological systems that we see accelerated aging in our cells. So you don't want to age prematurely? Take more breaks. It's really that simple. Now, here's an interesting study. In 2021, when many Americans, working remotely, middle of the pandemic, Microsoft conducted a study that followed 2 groups of people. One group had back-to-back Zoom meetings. The other group had 10-minute meditation breaks in between their Zoom meetings. Microsoft monitored the brain activity of 14 participants using an EEG. And in the first group, so the group with back-to-back meetings, what the EEG saw was brains that were filled with cortisol and adrenaline. Brains were tired, stressed, likely more irritable people, likely less compassionate people because they didn't have any breaks. And I'm willing to bet that this group does not have the mental space needed to recognize the glimmers and savor them when they arose in their lives, right? Because they didn't take their breaks. But the other group, the EEG was able to really visually see the difference that breaks made. Brains were quite visually relaxed. So what's my point here? My point is we're not meant to be running around crazy. That is not the purpose of life. I don't know what the purpose of life is, but I do know that running around crazy is not it. If we slow down, we will be more primed to enjoy life's simple pleasures. Full stop. We got 2 strategies left. Next is to make time for alone time. Yeah, okay. In our culture, social behavior tends to get rewarded. This world is not built for introverts. But who cares? Do things by yourself. Get that coffee by yourself. Go to the movies by yourself. Hike by yourself. Research finds that being alone gives you the space you need to reflect, to allow your mind to wander. Doing so inspires creativity, gives you those much needed breaks that we all need, whether we're extroverts, whether we're introverts. Research has shown that actively pursuing time alone for reflection and contemplation leads to greater pleasure, leads to greater meaning in life. Being alone gives you time to get to know yourself, to tap into your own passions, to tap into your own desires without influences from others. And guess what? Having time to yourself allows you, primes you to see the glimmers and savor them when they arise. Now, finally, strategy number 5 for making the most out of your glimmers is, of course, to verbalize them. Yeah, when we see a glimmer, whether we're alone or whether we're with others, say it. Say it with your mouth. Verbalizing the glimmer is a really easy way to bring conscious awareness to the glimmer, not just for yourself, but if you're with other people, it brings the glimmer to light for them as well. I do this a lot with my children because I want them to get in the habit of seeing glimmers in their own lives. So it's really a 3-step process, right? Notice the glimmer, step 1. Pause, step 2. And 3 is verbalizing the glimmer. So taking a couple deep breaths, noticing the beautiful sky, breathing it in, and then saying with my kids in earshot, wow, girl, look at that sunset. Oh my goodness, isn't it gorgeous how the oranges turn to pinks and the pinks turn to reds? Isn't that amazing? That's verbalizing it. And again, verbalizing is a savoring strategy because it extends the savor. Instead of just noticing the sunset and being like, oh no, that's nice in your head. And then your mind goes on to whatever its next stressful thought, stressful rumination, anxiety provoking, whatever thought that comes up. Instead of that, verbalizing extends the positive emotions we receive from the glimmer. So my final word today, I saw this interesting statistic in the book I'm reading. The book I'm reading has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but oh my gosh, it is so good. It's called Outlive. If you're interested in the science of longevity, you should definitely check out this book, Outlive. It's not an easy read, but it is my book of the summer for sure. Okay, so this is a statistic I picked up from this book, Outlive. And the statistic is this: retirement age is around 67 and life expectancy is about 78. It's a little less for men. It's about 75 for men. But okay, so retirement, 67, life expectancy, 78. Are we supposed to work for 50 years so that we may enjoy only 11 years of our life? Sit with that for a second. That is crazy pants. It's time we start enjoying our lives now by making the most out of the little moments. The little moments. Yeah, go on the big trips. Sure, we should be doing those things now too. But if money does not fall from the trees in your yard, as it does not in my yard, we can enjoy our lives right this moment by savoring the glimmers. So that's our show today. We do have an eco tip, and our eco tip comes from Michelle. Michelle wrote to me because she knows that next week is book club, and next week we're talking about How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price. There's still time to join us if you'd like. The link to do so is in our show notes. I have gone through the 30-day phone breakup with a couple listeners. And Michelle wrote to me and she said that when she broke up with her phone, she came across Aro, A-R-O. It is a subscription service, which she admittedly said is a bit of a turnoff. But Aro offered a 30-day free trial, and it definitely worked for her. It's like an app plus a box. And she says the app is what really discouraged her from picking up her phone. And yeah, it's $22 a month after the free trial. But Michelle said that she tried a lot of things to break up with her phone, and Aro was the only thing that actually stuck. It actually worked. So for anybody who, they're trying to step away from their phone, and the app blockers, the screen blockers, they work for a little bit, but they don't work long term. Michelle suggests you check out Aro. I have not checked out Aro, so I'm not vouching for it, but Michelle is. So check it out if you're interested. We will be back on Tuesday where we're discussing decluttering for mental health. So yeah, decluttering is great and all if you want a nice looking house, but decluttering is also a great way to improve your mental and emotional health. We're going to get into that on Tuesday. I will see you then. As always, reach out if you need me. I'm here. See you then and take care.